Hello and welcome, everybody. Today we are tackling the topic of why kids are quitting sports. And quite honestly, it's an alarming rate, especially here in America. And I know, Rhea, you talked about how in Canada too, there's less and less participation. And there's so many reasons why on the surface level of why kids are playing sports. But as you and I and Jim have had conversations before, there's actually a lot more deeper levels of why kids are quitting. And it also has to go with, some reasons why people change jobs, which is interesting that you would correlate changing jobs and kids quitting sports. But you want to kind of go into that a little bit more and dive into some of the reasons why we've talked about kids are not playing as much anymore?
Yeah, you bet. I feel like one of the key skills that's required to truly explore the question as to why kids quit a sport, especially a sport that they actually like, is perspective taking. That's the skill. And perspective taking, just to remind the audience, is the ability to climb down in a ladder and imagine the experience of your child. Often, as parents or as coaches, we are seeing just the tip of the emotional iceberg. And we may not be seeing the depth of the pain and embarrassment a child would feel if they don't get, for example, to play as much as another kid. Imagine what that would feel like. I mean, it's going to affect their esteem. Even as an elite player, they can crumble to perform well when the big moment comes up if they're if they've noticed that their coach hasn't given them enough playtime, or perhaps somebody on their team is uh, saying things to them, jibing at them, making fun of them. They're getting that less playtime. One good example that I can give for the audience is I want you to imagine that somebody at your job were to say to you, "Hey, that report that you created, it really needs some work. Like, it wasn't really on point." I want everyone in the audience to just sit with that, no matter what your job is. If some coworker were to tell you that, what would that feel like inside for you? How would that affect your day, your week, how you feel about them, how you feel about the job? I'm going to guess that everything's going to shift a bit. You're going to have to do some deep inner work to pull from your baby toe so that you don't get unstable by that. Same thing like with your front lawn. If your front lawn, everyone else's lawn is green and yours isn't, and a neighbor passes by and were to say, "Hey, your lawn could use some work." Innocent statement. Maybe they said it as a joke, but deep down inside, it's painful. This is just the tip of the iceberg of what our kids are potentially dealing with. And that lends itself to, alongside a few other things that we're going to all dive into today, as to why kids at 13 years old are quitting their sports because it doesn't feel good for them. It doesn't feel good to be in that environment.
So Rhea, you talk about like this perspective, maybe it's a parent shift in perspective of how they see like their
Yeah.
child participating in sports. And you talk about this ladder, climbing this ladder and kind of seeing and understanding what your kid's going through. But like a lot of times kids won't tell their parents, right? Maybe something happened at practice, or maybe a coach did something at a game or whatever, and they feel a certain way. How do the parents, maybe certain questions or conversations they can have to get their child to open up to let them know what's going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, perspective taking, there's something really important that goes hand in hand with perspective taking. It's actually a game of imagination. You're using your intuitive, imaginative powers. So, for some parents out there, you might say, well, okay, it's easy when my kid comes to me and tells me, "Hey, this kid is picking on me. The coach is yelling at me. He's comparing me to other players. I don't feel good in that situation. My whole day was hijacked. That's why I didn't play well." That would be the dream. And in order to get to something like that, this is the imaginative pieces. If our kids aren't saying that, is for us to attune. So that means that in the car ride home with your kids, what does it feel like? What does it look like when the child has maybe they haven't played well? You now have to step out of your story, your meaning, your thoughts, your commentary, and climb into the world of the child. So in that moment, before you do anything, go, what could, if I had to use my imagination, what could be going on with that child? And how well you use your imagination will play a huge role in what you attune to. So if you can imagine that, gosh, I don't know, is somebody picking on him? Is the coach giving him a hard time? Is he comparing? Like just having those in your pocket and then bringing them to your mind in that moment would have you react and respond very differently to a bad play or to a frowny face than if you didn't have that intel, right? So what I'm saying is that look at your child's behavior, look at the way they're standing, look at their facial expression, look at their mood, look at the things they choose to say when they get in the car. And the attunement now comes, I'm going to pull from every part of the universe from my imagination to go, what could have caused that? Now, as a parent, the more you intuit, and there's a whole process to build intuition, which we're going to talk about it in later sessions. But when we start building our intuition, it's almost like ESP. So our kids have ESP with us. We can't hide anything from our kids. Our kids know, but the same thing applies to our kids. As a parent, there'll be moments where you just go, I know, and just feel something's going around with the kids at school. I just feel like there's something to do with their friends that's creating a conflict. And the more attuned and intuitive you become, you'll pick up on that. So now once you have that, what's the next piece? The next piece is to create safety. And safety looks like this. Were you feeling, so this is what safety doesn't look like. Is some kid picking on you and are you feeling like insecure? That takes a lot of bravery for a child to go, yes, mom, yes, dad, it does. The safety is where, this is what safety means. You and me, we're the same. So what you're really trying to do is have your child feel as if whatever they could be going through, feeling, hurting, pain, you have felt that. So now you have to go to your memory banks, either current or the past, and tell a story. And the story is going to look like something like this. You know what? I remember when I was playing basketball when I was about 14 years old. I remember the coach used to compare me to some of the other players, and I never liked how that felt. I always felt like, why is he doing that? And I could tell that it just affected my game. And you know, I for many years I felt that I wasn't playing to my best of my ability. Now, you haven't created any solution. All you've done is created a I'm the same as you. And then you leave it, or you ask the question, you ever feel like that? Now, again, timing is everything. Is that the conversation you have the minute your child gets in the car after the game? Probably not. I'm always big on, and we all are, on the teachable moment, that perfect intersection in time and space where your child's mind is receptive and alert and wanting to communicate with you. But that's the key, because if ever you're going to get a child to communicate, it's because you've created that safety of a shared experience in the right time, and then they go, you know what? My coach does actually do some comparison. And that's when you pull back the power and then you can start to lead.
Hey, Rhea, something I want to jump into. You have me thinking, is this like 85% of people they say don't like their jobs or they're burned out and they want to quit and do something else. And you think about like the pressure for kids today, especially in America, to play year-round sports. And they're not just, I'm not talking about seasonal, I'm talking about playing a sport year-round. Like I'm playing soccer year-round. Oh,
Yep.
okay, we're going to play baseball year-round. We're going to play basketball year-round. They're playing these year-round sports and almost like they're getting burned out. They're not enjoying it. And you made me think, like, as a parent, can we shift the perspective and think about, like, sometimes you hear parents like, I don't like my job because I'm burned out. I'm working all the time. I don't have
Yep.
time to have fun and enjoy. Can you kind of speak to that as well?
Well, you nail it. I mean, when kids are in a sport, it's not like there's some big cataclysmic thing that happens to them and they go, "Oh, I'm out." What happens is it's paper cuts over time. It's subtle, nuanced, and complicated things that are happening in a job, for example, where you go, they don't value me, they don't value my time, I don't feel recognized, I don't feel understood, I don't feel part of a collaborative team. That's generally what's having somebody feel burnt out. Because if you felt energized and you really love the people around you and you really felt that, somebody's understanding how you want to grow and develop in your, work environment, that would be a different conversation. So it's the same thing with sports. I think that's why people get burnt out in their jobs is because for all the reasons I just mentioned, but it's the same thing with the kids. This is not some obvious big cataclysmic thing like the boss yelled at me and therefore I'm out. It's all the paper cuts. It's the deepest feelings that don't have a place to go because nobody's asked the question. And here's the thing. Parents, us as parents, have to recognize what build our self-awareness to figure out what are we bringing to the experience of the child. For example, how do I know that I'm not comparing the athletic strengths of my son and to my daughter? But I don't go, son, you're way better than my daughter over here. It doesn't have to be that obvious. All it has to be is in a car ride, I mention how great my son is doing at their sport. But I don't mention anything about how my daughter's doing. And it's not even deliberate. It's not like I'm going, haha, how do I thwart my daughter? That one thing is going to stand like a beacon in one of those child's minds, probably my daughter. And it's going to be, well, what about me? Am I as athletic? Do you think I'm as capable? And this is where parents unconsciously are also lending themselves to, I don't know if I really like this sport because I'm not being recognized. They don't know. The child doesn't even know they're feeling this, but what's happening is they feel in the context of their brother or sister, they're not as good. So why do I want to stay in that situation? I don't. So I'm out. And take that and add that with a coach who might yell and compare, and take that with an underdeveloped, immature teammate that might rib and jibe. And now you have, I don't need this. Because we as adults wouldn't tolerate that. That's key. We wouldn't tolerate that from our neighbor, far more a team that we play at 4 times a week, right?
We know, Rhea, so a couple of things that as we wrap up this episode here today, but you talked to me before about connection before redirection. And that was the piece I was going to go back into and talk about, like whenever you say, hey, when's the right time to bring things up? Or like, whenever you say, hey, you talked about if somebody's saying something to you, like who's bullying you or who's saying that, like they're not going to say it right away, but do something that your kid loves to do. What's their maybe they're interested in Legos, or maybe they're interested in, going and getting something to eat somewhere, maybe a favorite restaurant. And you have these conversations, and like you said, all of a sudden they'll bring something up. And then that's when you get curious and ask questions, right? It's like, hey, well, what about that? What about that?
Love that.
And then you add that relatability piece. So I think for the listeners out there today, a couple of things to keep in mind is number one, be relatable. So, and number two, connect before redirect. And number three, if you're experiencing some of these things as an adult in a professional setting, think about what your kid's experiencing on a day-to-day basis as maybe new for the first time as well, and be compassionate and understanding and try to be a little more of like a, dig down deep as opposed to just seeing things on the surface. So Jim and Rhea, any final thoughts today before we wrap up this episode?
Go ahead, Rhea.
Well, one final thought I'd have is, when kids are quitting sports and the potential of a coach or a parent or a teammate is saying something, one thing that we always want to remember to also build is self-esteem, right? And that again, we are going to cover in a whole different section. But when you build self-esteem, that's when your child becomes powerful, because it does not matter whether the kid tries to unstable them or the coach says you're not good enough or a sibling goes, you're not as good as me. That child gets rooted and anchored in their power. And that's the thing that all the time we're always going to be looking for things to do to build self-esteem. And how we do that, we need to have another podcast so that we can cover all that.
Well, I think too, like we talk about, Jason, is we talk about this a lot, is it's not so much what you teach them, right? It's how you make them feel. And I think it's so key as parents and coaches, not only how we make them feel, but how we make them feel about themselves, right? And like you said, Rhea, with the things that parents we can do and as coaches to make them feel better about themselves and their sports experience, to allow them to enjoy the moment and want to continue to move on.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up this episode again, Jim, Rhea, it's been a great episode here. So much to unpack. I want to listen to this one a couple of times so you can write down those notes. And then we'll see you all again the next episode. Looking forward to diving into our next topic. You're definitely going to want to tune into it.